Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're dissecting a really fascinating piece of source material that completely flips how we understand everyday conflict. The text is called Discernment and the Shield of Silence, and it makes this wild argument. Those petty, annoying arguments we all get into, they are rarely just physical. The author argues they're actually manifestations of targeted spiritual attacks. So we're going to break down exactly how the text says these attacks operate, how you can spot them, and why your absolute best defense mechanism is, well, just staying silent.
To kick things off, I want you to consider this question. What is the cost of everything said in anger? Now, this isn't just some philosophical hypothetical. It's literally the core warning of the text we're looking at today. The author argues that in the heat of a provoked moment, when we lose control, everything said becomes a trap. It becomes a literal weapon that your opponent can pick up and use right back against you. It's a huge reminder of the sheer danger of uncontrolled reactions. So keep that exact phrase, everything said, in the back of your mind as we go through this, because it's the crucial pivot point where a minor spiritual annoyance suddenly snowballs into a very real physical disaster.
All right, let's get into the first section, spotting the spiritual attack. The author provides this really interesting step-by-step anatomy of an attack, mapping out chronologically how these provocations actually unfold.
According to the text, the absolute quickest way to spot one of these attacks is timing. Step 1 almost always lines up with a period where you're getting really serious spiritually, like maybe you're coming out of a fast or a season of intense prayer. Then, right at that spiritual high point, boom, step 2 hits, a sudden, completely random physical provocation from someone around you. And that leads directly into step 3, which is a deliberate attempt to trigger your anger. The author is super clear here. This sequence, it's not a coincidence. It's a highly calculated strategy meant to completely disrupt your focus.
And this is exactly where the concept of discernment comes into play. The text frames discernment as this absolutely essential ability to see past the physical, offhand comment and recognize the spiritual attack hiding underneath it. Without it, the author warns you're going to take the bait every single time. You'll hear the insult, you'll take it at face value, and you'll dive headfirst into a full-fledged argument. Discernment is basically the emergency brake that stops the cycle before it can even get going.
Which leads us perfectly into the next section, the provocation trap. So you might be wondering, why does this conflict actively seek to enter the physical realm in the first place?
Well, the author sets up this really stark contrast between spiritual defeat and physical provocation. According to the text, opposing forces attack you in the physical realm, trying to spark anger with words or annoying actions, precisely because they are actively losing in the spiritual one. They get incredibly frustrated when they can't defeat you on a spiritual level. So because they're blocked there, they pivot. They bring the battle into the physical world, basically hoping you'll mess up and give them an opening they couldn't force on their own.
This brings up a concept the author calls legal ground. Think of it like a locked door. Spiritual attackers are constantly looking for legal ground to strike you. But when you're super focused spiritually, that door is locked tight. So what's their workaround? They use your own anger against you. They rely heavily on your ignorance and your lack of discernment. By tricking you into losing your temper, you essentially hand them the legal ground they need. They couldn't break the door down themselves, so they provoke you into unlocking it and holding it wide open for them.
Now we have to look at the actual physical consequences of this in our next section. The weight of everything said. This is the climax of the attack. We're taking that bait has real, tangible fallout.
If you lose your discernment and you give in, the text outlines some pretty severe results. First off, you get dragged into a full-fledged argument over something entirely trivial. Second, you open the door to real-world consequences. We're talking about suddenly sitting in a principal's office or an HR department, looking around and wondering how you even got there. But you know what the most insidious consequence is? Having to explain everything said in anger. Because you lost control, the opposition scored a point, and they are walking away with a physical victory.
The text gives us this quote, "In uncontrolled anger, many things are said. They can even use those same words against you to try and put you in problems." This right here is the ultimate trap. When we lose our temper, our filter just completely vanishes, right? The text heavily emphasizes that everything said in those heated moments, every harsh word, every defensive snap, every wild accusation, literally becomes the ammunition used against you later on. Suddenly, you aren't even defending yourself against their initial provocation anymore. You are just desperately trying to explain away your own words.
Okay, so what's the solution? How does the author suggest we actually neutralize these provocations? The answer is what they call the shield of silence.
The author relies on two very well-known biblical metaphors here, being gentle as doves and wise as serpents. And in the text, these two ideas merge into a single, incredibly powerful action.
silence. The author states that taking just a split second before responding reveals something profound. Engaging simply isn't worth the spiritual cost. The wisdom of the serpent allows you to recognize the trap, while the gentleness of the dove allows you to choose silence instead of retaliation.
But the text adds a really crucial layer of nuance here, and that is, beware the pressure of the crowd. Attackers will often use everyday people around you to pressure you into responding. Now, the text makes it very clear, this does not mean everyone who annoys you is some literal agent of the enemy. But if the crowd around you isn't prayerful, they can be subtly influenced to push your buttons. They appeal to your pride, which makes maintaining that shield of silence a whole lot harder.
To back up this entire strategy, the author turns to our final section, Biblical Guidance on Disputes.
The first anchor the text uses is from 1 Corinthians. Why do you not rather accept wrong? The author uses this specific scripture to make a pretty bold assertion. They argue that as Christians, you should actually prefer to be wronged rather than desperately trying to get even. In this framework, fighting back, even if you are 100% physically right about the situation, is viewed as an utter failure. Why? Because you've traded away your spiritual peace just to win a pointless argument.
The second piece of textual evidence comes from 2 Timothy, which commands readers to avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. It advocates that a servant of the Lord has to be patient, gentle, and humble. The author uses this to highlight the ultimate goal of all this. By maintaining silence, you're not just protecting yourself. You might actually be helping the opposition escape their own snare. It completely reframes the refusal to argue. It becomes both a personal defense and an act of spiritual rescue.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. Why do you not rather accept wrong? Now, I know that goes against literally every natural human instinct we have to defend our pride. But based on the text we've analyzed today, we have to weigh the options. Is the momentary satisfaction of a sharp comeback really worth the spiritual defeat? The next time you feel a trap being set, remember the sheer, destructive weight of everything said in anger. And maybe, just consider the ultimate power of the shield of silence.